Hi, everybody. Today's Monday, February 23rd, 2026, and our dear friend, our brother Larry Johnson is here with us. Welcome
Hey,
back.
nice shirt today. Yeah, I'm glad to see you got back into the competitive spirit.
I did my best, but you're shining right now. I'm
Yeah,
just
look
on the
look at the
margins.
yeah. See, all the
Yeah,
sunrise.
it's
Yeah,
all
I can do.
beautiful.
We can pretend the sun is rising.
Yeah, exactly. Mine
But
is the same. It doesn't change going down, but it's beautiful.
yeah, look.
Yeah,
There's so many terrible things going on in the world. We got to have something to
exactly,
laugh about and to try to cheer
exactly.
people up. We don't want them to, we don't want them at the end of the show going, "Oh my God, there's no way out. I'm going to kill myself."
Yeah, sure. Please hit like button, helping us reaching more people. Larry, let me start with what General Petraeus said about the ongoing conflict between Iran and the United States. Here is what he said.
Have to expect that if they do not truly come to the table and truly make serious concessions, that they're going to see how defenseless they are against attack from the air. Keeping in mind that the Israelis, using U.S. provided F 35 stealth fighter bombers, took out the supposedly sophisticated Russian S 300 air and ballistic missile defense system that Iran had, provided again by Russia, and then other air defense batteries and systems that they had. So, again, if you fly above, say, certainly 12,000, maybe a bit higher, again, Iran really can't touch them.
Yeah.
Fafo, fuck
Yeah.
around, find out.
Yeah.
The only thing I wish is that Petraeus had his butt sitting in one of the cockpits of those planes as they quote fly into Iran, because one of the big lies about the June 13th attack and the disablement of some of Iran's air defense systems last June, they were not done by aircraft that flew into Iran. It was done by sabotage groups on the ground. So there really is, we've not seen any credible evidence that Israeli aircraft actually penetrated and flew and had air supremacy inside Iran. So that's, there's another myth that they continue to perpetuate. But it is pay attention to Petraeus, because he's not just offering his opinion. He is reflecting the belief of the U.S. intelligence community. They really believe this nonsense. So, we'll find out. But I was listening, I was on Judge Napolitano's show half hour ago before coming on here. And he played a clip from Trita Parsy. Now, I think Trita's a good analyst in general, but Trita he made this statement, and maybe it was just he didn't intend to say this, but what he said was that Iran is weaker today than it was 2 years ago. And I'm looking, I said, well, what planet are you living on, my brother? I would argue right now, militarily, Iran is stronger than it's ever been in its history. And that's because Iran swallowed its pride and sought help from Russia and China, who were more than willing to provide assistance and have. And whether it's providing radar, whether it's providing augmented air defense systems on the ground, Petraeus speaks derisively of the S-300 capability when the S-300 surpasses anything the Patriot missile system could do. But the S-400 is in an entirely different league. So if the West persists with this presumption that Iran's weak and they can't stop us and our F-35s are the best in the world, you know what? These $100 million hangar queens are just, they're not as good or capable as we like to think. I mean, just by comparison, the Russian Su-35, which is the comparable 5th generation fighter plane that Russia flies, has almost twice the range that a F-35 does. Ditto for the Chinese J-20. So, but the United States is walking around, oh man, we're so proud, we're so good. And we've not really been tested in combat up against somebody that can punch back. And while I really hope we don't, test that capability and go to war with Iran, if we do, I anticipate that the United States is in for a very rude awakening. It'll be shocking. We'll be shocked at how poorly we performed.
Let me, since you mentioned the name of Trita Parsy here, he's quite an interesting character, Larry, to me, because he doesn't know anything about the military of Iran, the power that they possess today. And what he always commenting on that Iran is less capable and they're weaker than they were before. Even he said something so amazing to me, that Iran today is much more, the society is much more under pressure than it was 20 years ago. When he's talking about the freedom, these kids, that the way that they want to live, and he's just making lies after lies, Larry. I don't know why is he doing what is his purpose of making these sort of comments. He doesn't know a single, I would say, an angstrom, a little, an iota about what's going on in Iran.
Well,
and
he gets
Larry,
paid.
I was out of Iran for 12 years, and when I got there, I couldn't believe the change that I've been witnessing in the society.
Yeah.
You cannot, if you go to Iran, you see the level of discussions in Iran, political discussions in Iran. You would say, so what are we talking about outside? You see the worst, critics of Iranian government comes from inside Iran. You cannot find it outside. And Trita is somehow 20 years ago and today. I don't know why is he seeking for, what is his purpose. But after all, these are, the same sort of, I would argue that these are connected with neoliberals in the United States. That's why he's trying to keep in that, ilk, to be part of that ilk. That's why he's making these sort of outrageous comments when it comes to the military, when it comes to the intelligence, when it comes to the society, Iranian society. And
well, see, look, I do what I do not to get paid. Not, I'm not making money hand over fist with this at all. In fact, you can make the case that I've been hurt financially because of it. But if I sought a job at a think tank and said, look, I'm going to give you my objective analysis, and we'll start with facts, like the claim that Iran is the #1 sponsor of terrorism. Okay. Show me the incidents. Who are the most active terrorist groups in the world today? And the State Department and French think tank Fond du Lab, they show that all of the especially if you measure it in terms of who's causing the most casualties, who's killing and wounding the most, they're all Sunni groups. They're not Hamas and Hezbollah. They're not groups that Iran has no tie with them whatsoever. And so if I went out to a think tank and said, we're going to put that out, they'd say, oh, no, because it would upset their donors. Their donors want a propaganda that portrays Iran in the worst possible light. And they keep talking about the extremism of the mullahs. Now, back in well before you were born, or just shortly, just prior to you coming into this world, in 1980, 81, 82, there were some extreme acts, and the religious police are cracking down, and women had to wear the hijab, and Iran sort of created an image of itself as an intolerant place, but that's not the case now. and it has, one of the criticisms that have been reflected in some of the legitimate polls that have been done is that people wanted, let's ease up on all these Islamic restrictions on dress, etc. And they've done that. And so the West refuses to come to grips with what Iran is today. But particularly when we look at the first 25 years of this century, of the 21st century, it has been about combating terrorism. The terrorism has been carried out by Sunni extremist groups that have been funded in part by the West. I mean, it goes back to the CIA funding for these radical Sunni groups in Pakistan that then were subsequently used by the United States to attack Russia in the late 1990s with the Second Chechen War, and have continued to have relationships with these groups, including, the most recent example was Hayat Tahrir al-Sham with al-Jalani, now al-Shara. And, this is a group directly tied to ISIS. It's gone through some evolutions, but nonetheless, it's still an ISIS quality group. And here's the United States funding it, aiding it, while Iran is fighting against, through the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Command, the IRGC, are fighting against those radical Islamists. We're fighting in Syria. I mean, in the real world, the United States should have been allied with Iran because we shared a common goal: eliminate these radical Sunnis who are intolerant of other people. The Iranian, the Shia Islam that is practiced by and upheld by the mullahs is not one that goes out to tell people you got to convert or die. That has been the reputation of some of these Salafists and Takfiris, but not Iran. But again, the West refuses to deal with that. And that's where it's unfortunate. Trita sort of plays into that mythology instead of challenging it and really blowing the whistle on it. Because I'm happy to take anybody on with respect to the issue of terrorism. We want to go back and, they try to pretend that Iran is responsible for the deaths of thousands of Americans. Absolutely not true. Provably false. But again, nobody wants to deal. When you confront them with the facts, they go off on some other tangent.
Yeah. And Larry, we had the Iranian foreign minister Araghchi having an interview and talking. He was asked about the current phase of negotiations, the current situation with the negotiation on the part of Iranian, and how they feel about this situation. And here is what Araghchi said in terms of preparing, the terms that Iran would agree on with the negotiation with the United States.
President Trump plans to strike Iran, or is he using this threat as leverage?
Well, I'm not, I cannot judge, but one fact is there that if they want to find a resolution for Iran's peaceful nuclear program, the only way is diplomacy. And we have proved this in the past, and I believe that still there is a good chance to have a diplomatic solution which is based on a win-win game, and a solution is at our reach. So there is no need for any military buildup, and military buildup cannot help it and cannot pressurize us.
Yeah. Here is what he said, and what we've heard from Steve Witkoff yesterday. And he was mentioning that the president of the United States is somehow frustrated with Iran. He's preparing to receive some sort of proposal from Iranians, and he didn't receive it so far. And they don't capitulate. He used the term capitulation, that Iran needs to capitulate to Donald Trump. Putting these two concepts together, Larry, Are we heading toward a war? What is your assessment? Because I don't see Iran capitulating to anybody, to anybody. And on the other hand, Donald Trump wants some sort of capitulation. Is that going to be the sort of capitulation that Donald Trump has achieved in against Houthis in the Red Sea, or are we going to have a new war with between Iran and the United States?
I think the war is inevitable because of the size of the combat, the air combat force that has been deployed to the region. Now, the fact that there are two carrier strike groups in the region, they're really not, they're not important either strategically or tactically. They're actually more of a burden, because if they get close enough, the one that's in the Mediterranean is there, I guess, in theory, to try to provide protection for Israel in the event that Iran launches ballistic missiles and drones against Israel, as it did last June. The other ship, the Abraham Lincoln, which is off the coast of Iran, quite a ways off the coast. Again, the weapons it has on board, both with its planes, the 10 F-35s, and the destroyers, the ability to launch Tomahawk cruise missiles, to have any effect in the interior of Iran, require those ships to get, close, within 200 miles of the coast. Well, once they do that, they're extremely vulnerable to Iranian missile attacks, because Iran's anti-ship missiles are now my understanding is they're now integrated with Chinese satellites. So it's actually quite easy to pinpoint where those ships are and to take them out. That leaves the land-based F-35s, which are in places like, which are principally in Saudi Arabia and Jordan. Now, we saw Tucker Carlson's interview with Mike Huckabee, in which Huckabee basically said, hey, Israel can take all of the Middle East. Screw Jordan, screw Syria, screw Turkey, screw, Iraq, etc. And man, that set off, I'll call it the equivalent of a nuclear bomb among all of the Arab Muslim nations in that region. And the reason I raised this is you had Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. They were both signed on to it. Both of them pissed off. They hate each other right now. But, let's call Huckabee the great uniter. He even brought them together. So it raises the question does that anger translate into Jordan and Saudi Arabia telling the United States, no, you're not, no, get your damn aircraft out of here. You're not going to fly from here. That's a possibility. At least, I haven't seen any movement in that direction, but you can't discount that as a possibility. Does and the United States persists under this belief that with air power, we can defeat Iran. We can cause such damage that Iran won't be able to function. All right, I ask everybody to take a step back, take the United States and Iran out of the equation. Let's make it Russia and Ukraine. Look at all of the missiles that Russia has fired into Ukraine over the last 4 years. I mean, incredible volumes. And yes, it's caused damage. It's caused destruction. But has Ukraine collapsed and given, we give up, no more, and Ukraine's basically got 1/5 the population of Iran. Iran is a landmass, I believe, is like 3 times the size of Ukraine. So it's like, everybody, wake up and stop deluding yourselves that you think the United States can launch even 1,000 sorties and that's going to force the Iranians to collapse. Is not going to happen. And then you get into the issue of the maintenance on these F-35s and their ability to perform and sustain combat operations. It is the United States has convinced itself that it's a 10-foot tall giant with unlimited capabilities, and in fact, we only stand about we're more like a dwarf. We're shorter, and we're not nearly as physically capable as we think we are. So that's it's setting up for something that could be if the United States acts on this presumption, and I think I know that the military personnel were fully expecting that we would have attacked this last weekend. We didn't, and you can come up with there are a number of factors that intervened. One is my understanding is that Tulsi Gabbard and J.D. Vance both vociferously protested and lobbied against doing it, and Trump apparently listened. They were buttressed by a poll. I know the person that carried out a poll where they showed Trump that he would have no support, and that if he does this, the odds that the Republicans would lose the midterms and have no hope whatsoever of recovering is very high, and that he would be completely neutered and probably impeached and convicted. So then on top of that, the fact that there's only, right now, even with his quote base, 25% of Americans would support an attack on Iran. That means 75% don't. So it just, Trump is, they've manufactured a narrative that is not supported by the facts.
Larry, since you mentioned the size of Iran, let me show a clip that shows it could be for us and for our audience to understand the size of the country, Iran. Here is the video. It goes to the Europe. You see how much of Europe is covered by Iran.
Yeah.
And then goes to Canada, and then comes down to the United States. And many people saying that the state of Texas is much, much bigger than the state of Texas. It's not even comparable. And somehow Donald Trump feels that they can, Larry, what do you think that the Trump administration, what are the intelligence, what are the information on the Iranian air defense system, and what was Iran provided with by Chinese? Because so far it seems from what is in the mainstream media that we can monitor, that we've learned that China's YLC 8B, that call it YLC 8B radar, that gives Iran the power to detect stealth jets. When it comes to the F-35, which is the only fighter jet in that category.
Well, and let's deal with the geographic size issue. If you're in an F-35, you've got to fly from, let's say, Muwafaq Shati Air Base in Jordan, or from the air base in Saudi Arabia. So from Saudi Arabia, the air base there to Iran's border, western border, is I think about 200 miles. Okay, let's do the math. The combat radius for an F-35 is 600 miles. So if you got to fly 200 miles and then you got another, does that mean they can fly in another 100 miles and then they have to turn around and come back? Or if there's a limit on how far the planes can go without being refueled. Well, you're not going to fly air refuelers over Iran. So that means they've got to be done over Saudi Arabia. And even then, we now know with the Chinese radar that you just mentioned, it can see out about 420 miles. And so anybody that's in that range, they can see it. And Iran does have surface-to-air missiles that can reach that far. So what you wind up with is these F-35s, even though we got 1,000 of them, want to hit 1,000 targets, they've got some real limits on how far they can fly into Iran. And the assumption is they can fly without being opposed. And I believe that one of the key developments that has been taking place and is still continuing is the deployment and training, the deployment of air defense systems with Russian and Chinese personnel, both manning them in some cases, but also conducting training for Iranian forces. So I don't think, I know some military planners have recognized that the United States is going to suffer casualties. The question is how many? And when Trump is elected on the premise we're not going to get involved with stupid, meaningless wars in the Middle East, and then here he is getting ready to start a stupid, meaningless war. Right now the conventional wisdom in the United States is that the attack will come Wednesday, Thursday, or next weekend. Even though it's a full moon, even though U.S. military, Air Force planners don't want attacks to come in full moon when there's all that light. And nonetheless, that's what they're expecting. We'll see. I know that there are others intervening with Trump to say, hey, we can't afford to go to war with Iran. You can't. It'll destroy you politically. So we'll see if Trump's listening or not, because he is under enormous pressure from the Zionists.
These Zionists are mostly located in the United States, or they're from Israel as well? And I would, how do you see Israel in this calculation? It's all about the Zionists in the United States, or outside the United States, they're having the leverage on Trump?
Well, I was going to say yes. It's both. It's not one or the other. And it's important. I've been accused of being an anti-Semite because I don't believe in Zionism. Now, I think I rank Zionism right up there with Nazism. It's an ethno-supremacy. It's basically saying we as a group who identify as Jewish, we are supreme and superior to everybody else, that we deserve rights that nobody else has, or at least like as it's conducted in Israel, they are a class above Palestinians and Christians. What in one of the things that came out of Tucker Carlson's recent interview with Mike Huckabee was Tucker said, hey, if you're Jewish, if you're genetically, you can show you're an Ashkenazi Jew and you convert to Christianity, the Israelis will not allow you into Israel because you're not kosher. And I thought, I'd never heard that. But I looked it up and it's absolutely true. So what it shows is that really Zionism is anti-Christian at its core. And yet you got so many Christians that are supporting it. And it's all really, it's built around a mythology. But nonetheless, it is a very powerful mythology that has continued to motivate and inspire this genocide that has been taking place against the Palestinians. It fundamentally, the real irony of all this is the father of Zionism as a concept is Theodore Herzl. Well,
he was atheist. Yeah,
he was atheist. I mean, the entire concept is all with Huckabee. The entire concept of Zionism about Israel's right to the land is based upon a belief that what we call the Old Testament, and I know I'll offend some of the religious listeners and watchers, but sorry, that the religious ones believe this was written by Moses, Moses had nothing else to do but sit down and write out a book. But the reality was what we know as Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, Numbers, the first 5 books of the Bible, that which the Jews call the Torah. That was compiled by Jewish scholars who had been captured in the Babylonian exile back in around 550 BC. So we're talking almost 2,600 years ago, and they wrote this story out, and it's written from a Jewish perspective. So like any author that writes something, it reflects your views, your values. But it has been invested by many Christians and many Jews as an authoritative, that this isn't something created by men. Oh, no. This is created by this deity. But then when you dig into it and look at what the deity says, it basically empowers the, quote, descendants of Abraham, who are through Isaac and Jacob. They're empowered to kill whoever they want that are in this land. That they are given special status that's above other people. Well, that's one of the contradictions in the Old Testament. We're told to believe that God created all. God created male and female. Didn't create just one group of people, created all. And thou shalt not murder. And yet, then you got this other God that shows up. Yeah, go kill those Amaleks. If they're in your land, kill them, wipe them out. Kill the men, the women, the children, the dogs, the animals, kill them all. I mean, that's in there. And you see people like, here we are, the 21st century. And, you're watching Mike Huckabee, who's been a governor. He's not an uneducated man. But God, he says the most ridiculous nonsense to justify, oh yeah, we got these people, these are God's special people. Which the essence, what his Christianity came out with was there are no special people. All people are special. All people are children of God. Yeah, that's a fairly unique concept within the various religions, that presenting a God that actually is concerned about all of humanity, just not one group. So that's where I say this whole Zionism thing is it's poisoned us, and it continues to be used as an excuse for murder and genocide.
Larry, let me bring on what Araghchi, the foreign minister of Iran, said about enrichment. And it's so amazing to me how he can keep calm when the reporter, she's asking outrageous questions. I was so furious. Just hear what he said.
President Trump consider allowing Iran to have even the smallest bit of enrichment?
Well, first of all, enrichment is our right. We are a member of NPT, and we have every right to enjoy a peaceful nuclear energy, including enrichment. How we use this right is something related to us only. The enrichment is a sensitive part of our negotiation. The American team know about, they knows our position, we knows their position, and we have already exchanged our concerns. And I think a solution is achievable, but I'm not going to negotiate through media.
Yeah, she's talking about why the president of the United States should let Iran to enrich uranium, as though Donald Trump is the god.
Well, if I was advising the government of Iran about negotiations, I would start by saying, okay, we're going to stop with this intermediary crap that's going on where we talk to the Omani, and then he goes to the other room and talks to the Americans, and then he comes back and tells us what the Americans said. No, we're going to sit in the same room and we're going to talk. Now, if we can't do that, don't waste our time. And I would maintain that I think Iran is in a stronger position now to do that because of BRICS, because of Russia and China, because of the growing economic strength of Russia and China. 10 years ago, when JCPOA was signed, Iran did not have a lot of options. It didn't have somebody could go to say, oh, you know, the West is trying to put all these sanctions on us. Can you help us find relief? Because back then, China and Russia were willing to back up those sanctions, but not now. Russia and China have made clear, no, we're not going to abide by those sanctions at all. So there is an economic road open for Iran that didn't exist even a year ago. That's, I think, one thing that people are failing to understand and appreciate. Iran now has economic options it didn't have before, and it has increased its military strength. It hasn't stopped. It didn't stop building ballistic missiles even during the 12-day war, and call them missile cities. I don't think Western intelligence fully comprehends or correctly assesses the number of ballistic missiles that Iran has and what their total capability is. And Iran has a variety of options for launching those in ways that the United States cannot stop. I mean, look, we do have historical evidence from 1990 during the first Gulf War, and then from 2003 about the inability of the United States Air Force and principally the Air Force to find, locate, and destroy ballistic missiles from the air. And let's add in that naval aviation. We just saw that recently, 8 months ago, in Yemen, that the United States went in there to destroy and disrupt and was unable to. Yeah, they caused some damage and they did some destruction, but nothing that completely hampered the Houthis from continuing to retaliate. And there's no comparison in terms of military capability of what Iran's can do versus what the Houthis could do. I mean, the Houthis are, brave fighters, but good Lord, they're like a child's, a baseball team, soccer team for children compared to professional soccer players. Iran's in a different league. And that's what I think the West fails to appreciate. So we keep telling ourselves, we tell us lies, sweet little lies, to take Fleetwood Mac out of context. But that's why if this goes to conflict, which I think it's likely, and again, I hope I'm wrong, that cooler heads will finally prevail on the U.S. side. But I think Iran candidly is wasting its time on these negotiations because the United States is not sincere. It's not about the enrichment. It's about the mullahs. It's about this religious society that is Iran. That is what has to be destroyed. We have to have a group of people in charge that are going to do what we tell them to do.
What's amazing about the perception of Iran on the part of the majorly mainstream media in the West, basically in the United States, is that they think that Iran is run by mullahs. And you see that in the calculation of the president of the United States, Donald Trump's talking about that he's going to assassinate the supreme leader of Iran and his son, for example.
Right.
So what difference that could bring to the table for you, and how can you get some sort of leverage by doing that? These are so much childish, Larry, when you think of Iran, that Iran is some sort of clerics, mullahs running the show. The whole Iran is one of the most sophisticated, Larry, systems that I've ever seen. The system is running the country. It's not some people, some, one guy, as they would call that, the supreme leader of Iran is running everything.
Yeah.
That's basically a total lie. If they go with that concept, that's gonna be devastating for their calculation, in my opinion.
Well, look, there's been an extensive disinformation campaign run by, I believe it's ultimately run by the CIA, but it's using cutouts, and I think we talked about this briefly on Friday. A group out of the Netherlands called Gamaan, Gamaan, and then it's partnered up with a Canadian company that has a VPN. Well, when you look into the funding sources, what these companies are set up to do is to conduct polls over the internet, which they claim are much more objective, that people can respond anonymously, which is like, if you got them responding anonymously, how do you know that you're actually dealing with a person? But the information that comes out of those polls is that 80% of the Iranians hate the rule of the mullahs and want them gone and would welcome any new government. And so that is what the majority of people in the United States, the vast majority, believe. And the purpose of those polls, I believe, was not so much to persuade Iranians. It is to condition the West to justify attacking Iran. How many Iranians does the West claim have been killed in the protests? Do you know the number?
It was the West. There we're talking about 30,000, 40,000, 80,000.
Yeah, but 30,000. Does that 30,000 number have any relevance back in the history of Iran, say under the rule of the Shah? Because my understanding is that in the year, the 12 months, 16 months before the Shah was overthrown, the number of Iranians that were actually killed by Savak and the Shah's enforcers was 30,000. Now, I don't believe that number that's being touted now is just, they've just picked it randomly. I believe it's a deliberate way to reflect back on the past to justify a current overthrow. But this belief, and you find it right now. Again, a couple of these Zionists, these crazed Zionists I've been dealing with, that they cite that to me. They've killed 30,000 people. Are you okay with that? And I always respond and say, well, that's half what the Jews have killed in Gaza. So, if you're not bothered by killing over 70,000 Palestinians and murdering men, women, and children, why should we get our hair on fire over just 30,000 in Iran? Oh, they don't like that.
Yeah. It's Larry. How far, in your opinion, would Donald Trump go with the attack on Iran? Because in my understanding, as you mentioned, it seems that there are Russians and Chinese, I would say, operators in Iran to work with these weapons, the air defense systems, because they're integrating not only the Russian air defense system to the Chinese radars, but the integration is all around. But Iranian air defense system, Russia's air defense system, Chinese radars, and these are all communicating with each other. And how far Donald Trump would go if your assumption, your estimation is the attack is coming? And is it going to be because after all, Donald Trump is not going to be able to sustain the conflict more than 3 weeks or maybe 4 weeks. Then after that, what is he planning to do?
Well, if the West proceeds with the assumption that it can deliver a knockout blow and that Iran will lay down and give up, that I think is a false assumption. Now, I don't know how far the assistance of Russia and China has actually gone. I am assuming that it is significant, substantial. So let me put it in different scenarios. If the Chinese have in fact deployed a radar system that can detect 400 miles out from the borders of Iran, and has provided either the personnel to operate that system and or have trained Iran to operate it, and have integrated that radar system with China's vast satellite system, and they have also integrated that system with the Russian air defense, the S-300 and S-400 systems. If that has taken place, then Iran is very well positioned to inflict significant damage on the U.S. combat air force. And to the point that if they could affect the kinds of losses that I believe they're capable of, it would create a political crisis for Donald Trump. Now, if in fact the support from China and Russia is not as great as I believe, then Iran's going to face they will face greater suffering. But we still forget that even in the midst of a surprise attack on June 13th of 2025, within hours, Iran was still capable of retaliating against Israel. And at that time, they avoided retaliating against the military bases. But not this time. And here's what leads me to believe that actually the support that the Chinese have provided is quite substantial, because the Chinese were publishing the satellite imagery showing where all the U.S. military air defense systems are deployed in these various bases in Saudi Arabia and Jordan. They're sending a message to the West. This is, it's not Iran on its own. So again, the role of assumptions, what people are told. I do know that the briefings that the U.S. Military intelligence are providing to their leadership and on to Trump are grossly underestimating Iran's capabilities. They are dismissing them as not terribly significant. I think they will find out that they were wrong. But the problem is, when you're wrong on something like that, you've cost the lives of other people. And, in contrast to what happened last June, Iran's got a couple of options. One, if, as I believe, China has provided extensive intelligence sharing along with Russia, that Iran will get an early warning once aircraft lift off to begin conducting an attack on Iran. And I think at that point, once Iran is assured that an attack is inbound, they will launch immediately on those U.S. bases. That will be the primary target, to go after the military infrastructure that will then hamper the ability of the United States to sustain such an attack. And so they will hold off before attacking Israel. But I think at that point, you can see Israel starting to get engaged. And then, this war is going to escalate. And Iran's going to suffer damage, but Israel will suffer greater damage. And the United States military forces, they'll be looking at potentially thousands of casualties in a short period of time that it'll be shocking to the American public. How could this happen? Because, we fought wars for 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the total number of dead over those 20 years was 6,000. That's nothing. What happens if we get 6,000 in 2 weeks? That'll create a political firestorm for Donald Trump.
Larry, the Trump administration tried to intimidate, the groups they call it Hashdul Shabi in Iraq, just to inform them, if you enter the fight, if in terms of the attack on Iran, you're going to get hit by the United States. And on the other hand, we see that the U.S. embassy in Beirut has reportedly evacuated its staff through the,
Yeah, that could I just comment? That I see as a warning sign that, in fact, an attack will take place. We have not, even though we've had this tremendous buildup of assets, and the timing and weather was such that we expected the attack to come. We didn't see no TAMs being issued. Notice the airmen stay out of this airspace. And we didn't see the evacuation of personnel from certain locations. Now, if that's true, if they're starting to evacuate certain embassies, then that's a sign that this attack's going to come. And boy, if it does, let me put it this way: the people who hate Donald Trump, they'll be thrilled, because this will destroy his presidency.
And it's a sign for me that they couldn't even intimidate Hezbollah not to attack them. That's why they're evacuating the forces. That it's not going to work. I think the way that they were trying to somehow put pressure on Iraq and Iraqi government, and then put pressure on these groups, and they call it Hashd al-Shabi in Iraq. That's not going to work as well.
Yeah.
We're going to see some sort of multi-phase conflict, and it seems that it's going to be from Lebanon, in Iraq with Houthis. And how do you think that Israel would be somehow dealing with Iraq, and I don't know, with Houthis and Hezbollah, then the United States dealing with Iran and Iraq? I don't know how what would be that combination of the reaction if that happens.
If the United States proceeds with an attack, the Houthis have not been firing at Israel. They've basically abided by the ceasefire. Now, they still haven't. My understanding is they still prevent any ships headed to Israel from transiting the Red Sea. But apart from that, they've stopped firing missiles at Israel. You could see the combination of the Houthis and Hezbollah, if they start adding their own supply of missiles into attacks on Israel, that's going to further more rapidly deplete the supply of air defense missiles, both for the Iron Dome, the Patriot, and the THAAD, the Terminal High Altitude Air Defense System. And once those air defense missiles are exhausted, Israel is undefended. And Iran, I believe, in contrast to U.S. intelligence estimates, may have between 10 to 20,000 ballistic missiles. U.S. estimates are it's around 2,000. I think that's grossly understated.
Because the estimation that I've read is that Iran has produced 800 missiles, ballistic missiles, since the attack on Iran in June 2025. It was 8 months. Let's assume 100 a month they have produced ballistic missiles. I don't know how accurate is that, but it's going to be, in my opinion, going to be above that. But
yeah.
These numbers are not accurate, and nobody's talking about these numbers the way that it is, the reality of what is happening. Larry, the other thing would be the aircraft carrier, which is close to Greece right now, the Gerald Ford.
Mm-hmm.
And Wall Street Journal reported that the title is Missed Funerals and Blocked Toilets. Iran deployment takes a toll on U.S. sailors. And these people are being, they're not happy with the situation they're in. But it seems that the United States is going to use this aircraft carrier to defend Israel as a as an air defense system.
Yeah, and it's
Is
got
that the
limit, but
case?
it has limited capability. It's got 10. A normal squadron for an aircraft carrier is 10 F-35s, and the ability in an intense combat environment to sustain operations, they're going to run into problems. So that's why I said this is the force. The naval force is not that significant that's been deployed. What is significant is the air assets. I know at least close to 1/3 of all of the U.S. Air Force combat assets have been deployed to the theater. That's a huge amount. Then, if they continue to remain there without being used for a while, then you're going to get a degradation in their capabilities over time.
Yeah. Larry, before wrapping up this session, let me shift the gear a little bit to Ukraine. I'm sure that you've heard what Boris Johnson said about sending troops to British troops to Ukraine in order to facilitate, the whole process of negotiation and the deal and agreement, possible agreement. Do you see under any scenario that the Russian part would agree on the British on a situation, on a treaty that accepts that the British troop would be in Ukraine, close to the Russian border?
No, not at all. I think actually the real risk right now, or the unanswered question is, will Russia retaliate against the United Kingdom for this missile that hit a munitions factory more than 1,000 miles inside Russia the other day? It was done by the Brits, and this comes on the hill of the Russians announcing in public that the Brits also were involved with the assassination attempt on the number 2 man in Russian military intelligence. It would not surprise me if Russia moved to launch an Oreshnik missile against the factory or a military target inside the United Kingdom. As they're not going to play around anymore. And this would evoke outrage, and it would get NATO all up in arms and talk about, okay, we now got to have an Article 5. Are we going to attack Russia? They will. I think if that happens, they'll find that the Article 5 will collapse. So Britain has set itself up here, and I think that the Russians, the temperature in Russia among the leadership is that this can't go unanswered, and there will be a retaliation for this of some significance.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure.
Sorry, I didn't bring better news. At least we're still alive.
Nothing good to news.
Yeah. We'll see by the end of the week what Colonel Wilkerson and I will have to say at that point.
Exactly.
I pray for peace, but man, doesn't look good.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry.
All right, my friend.
See you on
Friday.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.